Commander Vrazil stood aboard the Dominion's flagship, gazing at Earth with cold calculation. "Their defenses are laughable," said, flicking through intelligence reports. Human weapons, though advanced for their planet, were nothing compared to the Gravakul's energy-based arsenal. A swift strike, and they'll be ours by the end of the cycle. Across the globe, humanity braced itself for the inevitable. Leaders held emergency meetings, and nations united in a way they hadn't in decades. Yet, the general mood among the public was a mix of fear and uncertainty. Could Earth, with all its infighting and historical blunders, possibly stand a chance against a galactic empire that had perfected the art of war? The invasion began as expected. Alien ships descended from the sky like falling stars, their immense shadow blotting out the sun. Cities were evacuated, and armies mobilized. In the first skirmishes, the Gravakul crushed human defenses effortlessly, confirming their superiority. Earth's largest military bases were decimated, and major cities quickly fell under alien control. Commander Vrazil, watching the chaos from orbit, allowed himself a small, rare smile. Humans, he thought, were proving to be as weak and disorganized as anticipated. But something strange happened after those initial victories. Instead of mounting a predictable counterattack, the humans seemed to disappear. Alien ground forces began encountering deserted towns and silent forests where there should have been resistance. Their scans showed no significant military formations, no fortifications. In their arrogance, the Gravakul believed the humans had given up, surrendering to their fate. However, what appeared as surrender was something else entirely. In the shadows, human leaders devised a strategy that baffled the alien invaders. General Sophie Westwood, an experienced strategist known for her unconventional thinking, took command of Earth's defense. "We cannot match their firepower head-on," she stated flatly in one of the underground command centers. "But we can confuse them, make them fight on our terms." And so, the humans did. Instead of massing their forces in open battles, they splintered into small, highly mobile units. Guerrilla tactics became the norm. Soldiers struck quickly, sabotaging alien supply lines, disabling communication arrays, and vanishing before the Gravakul forces could react. The aliens, conditioned by centuries of straightforward conquest, were unprepared for this seemingly chaotic form of warfare. They had expected glorious, decisive battles, not frustrating skirmishes that left their soldiers exhausted and disoriented. "What is this madness?" Commander Vrazil growled, reviewing reports of ambushed convoys and destroyed outposts. "These humans are cowards, refusing to engage in proper combat." Yet, beneath his contempt, there was a growing unease. Despite their superior technology and numbers, the Gravakul found themselves facing an enemy that fought like no other. Their analytical minds could not grasp the purpose behind human tactics, which appeared reckless and without pattern. But these tactics worked, and each passing day saw more alien forces stranded, misled, or ambushed by unseen enemies. For humanity, the war had only just begun. The early days were marked by fear, but as the initial shock of the invasion wore off, a fierce determination settled over the defenders. They understood now that the Gravakul were not invincible. And more importantly, they realized that their greatest weapon wasn't their technology, but their ability to think outside the rigid rules of war. As Commander Vrazil watched yet another costly skirmish play out on his display screen, a sinking feeling gripped him. Earth, once seen as an easy conquest, was beginning to feel like a trap of their own making. The humans, unpredictable and resourceful, had just started to reveal their true nature. The Gravakul Dominion had never known failure. But Earth was fast becoming a puzzle that no amount of brute force could solve. What began as a straightforward invasion had devolved into a confusing and frustrating campaign. Despite their overwhelming technological advantage, the aliens found themselves bogged down in a war of attrition, fighting an enemy they couldn't predict. Commander Vrazil's confidence eroded as each passing day brought new reports of human victories. "They should be falling apart by now," he hissed, pacing the command room of his ship. He scanned the latest battle report, A small human force had somehow infiltrated one of their energy depots, destroying it in a chain reaction. Thousands of Gravakal troops were cut off from resupply. It made no sense. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, yet they were winning key skirmishes that should have been impossible. At the heart of Earth's evolving strategy was General Sophie Westwood. Her military mind had always been unconventional, but now it was proving invaluable. She understood something the Gravakal couldn't grasp. War was not about fighting by the rules, but about bending them. "They're trying to outsmart us with sheer power," Sophie said, leaning over a holographic map of the alien front lines, her eyes flicking between strategic points. "But power doesn't win wars. Strategy does." She pointed to key Gravakal positions. "They expect a straightforward fight. We're going to give them chaos instead." Thus, the humans changed tactics again. They began using the environment to their advantage, drawing the alien forces into inhospitable terrain. The Gravakal found themselves battling in dense jungles, treacherous mountains, and frozen tundras where their technology, though superior, became more of a hindrance than a help. Advanced combat suits and energy weapons malfunctioned in the extreme conditions, while human soldiers, with their basic gear, thrived. The turning point came during a critical battle in the Amazon rainforest. The Gravakal, expecting human forces to meet them in the open, found themselves lost in the dense foliage. Their tracking systems, normally flawless, were scrambled by the thick canopy, and the humans attacked from all sides, melting into the forest after each strike. It was an ancient form of warfare, guerrilla tactics perfected over centuries, but it worked with terrifying efficiency. Vrazil slammed his fist on the console, furious. How can they defeat us with sticks and stones? His officers remained silent, knowing the commander's pride was too deeply wounded to accept the truth. The Gravakal had relied too much on technology, too much on calculated logic. They were facing a species that had evolved through chaos, trial, and error, a species that had thrived in unpredictability. Meanwhile, human commanders relished the confusion they were sowing. Not only had they disrupted the Gravakal's logistical network, but they had also planted false intelligence. Alien forces were being led into dead ends, chasing after decoy armies that didn't exist. Misinformation became one of humanity's sharpest weapons. Captain Nia Sullivan, a veteran of cyber warfare, led a covert team that hacked into the Dominion's communication systems. They fed disinformation directly to the alien commanders, making them believe human forces were massing in one area while, in reality, they were elsewhere, preparing to strike. "They can't win a game they don't know they're playing," Nia said with a grim smile after another successful operation. The Gravakal, accustomed to clear and direct conflict, were now utterly disoriented. Their command structure began to fray, with officers too afraid to act without absolute confirmation. Paranoia spread among the ranks. Every shadow, every movement became a potential ambush. The humans had taken control of the battlefield, not through force, but through fear and deception. Commander Vrazil stared at the planet below, a knot of dread forming in his chest. This was no ordinary war. The humans were not merely fighting for survival. They were outwitting the most powerful empire in the galaxy at every turn. Each Gravakal defeat chipped away at the illusion of their invincibility, and Vrazil, for the first time in his career, began to question whether they could truly win. The Gravakal Dominion prided itself on its flawless technological superiority. They believed their machines, their algorithms, and their calculated precision made them undefeatable. But as the war dragged on, a painful truth began to dawn on them. Humanity wasn't playing by the same rules, and their intelligence was proving far more dangerous than any weapon. Commander Vrazil could no longer ignore the obvious. His forces, armed with the most advanced weaponry in the galaxy, were being outmaneuvered, outwitted, and outclassed by a species they had deemed inferior. "How can this be?" he muttered as he reviewed yet another battle report. This time, an entire Gravakal battalion had been led into a trap. The humans had lured them into a narrow canyon, jammed their communications, and triggered a series of controlled avalanches that buried the troops alive. "They're not fighting us with technology," one of his sub-commanders said hesitantly. "They're fighting us with ideas." That was the truth that the Gravakal leadership was finally beginning to grasp. The humans weren't trying to match their advanced technology because they couldn't. Instead, they were exploiting the Gravakal's over-reliance on it. The aliens' cutting-edge systems, which required precise conditions to function perfectly, were being systematically undermined by simple, clever tricks. Human forces used electromagnetic interference to disable drone surveillance, exploited weather conditions to disrupt energy shields, and even used old-fashioned camouflage to bypass thermal sensors. General Sophie Westwood's strategy was genius in its simplicity. She understood the key flaw in the Gravakal approach. They trusted their machines more than their instincts. "We don't need to break their systems," she explained to her commanders. "We just need to make them question them." In one particularly audacious move, human hackers, led by Captain Nia Sullivan, managed to infiltrate the Gravakal's advanced battle AI. Instead of disabling it outright, they introduced subtle errors, misleading data, erroneous calculations. These tiny alterations were almost imperceptible, but they compounded over time, causing the AI to make critical mistakes in battle. The Gravakal never realized their most trusted asset had been compromised until it was too late. Meanwhile, on the ground, human soldiers had adapted to fighting alongside their own machines, but with a key difference. They didn't rely on them. Human ingenuity, improvisation, and creativity were their true weapons. Alien commanders, accustomed to rigid hierarchies and clear battle lines, were left scrambling as human forces constantly shifted their tactics. Ambushes came from unexpected places, and retreating forces were often leading them straight into traps. The tipping point came when the Gravakal attempted to deploy their most devastating weapon, an orbital strike capable of wiping out entire cities. They targeted a key human base in the Rocky Mountains, believing it to be a critical command center. But as the strike was initiated, the Gravakal realized too late that the base was a decoy, an empty shell with false heat signatures and fake communication signals. The real command center had long been moved, hidden deep underground. The strike not only missed its mark, but also triggered a massive chain reaction, damaging Gravakal ships in orbit. The humans had anticipated the strike and used the opportunity to launch a simultaneous cyber attack, disabling key systems aboard the alien fleet. In a matter of hours, what was supposed to be the Gravakal's greatest victory had turned into a devastating loss. For the first time in their history, the Gravakal Dominion felt vulnerable. Their soldiers, once arrogant and confident, were now hesitant and cautious. Commanders questioned their orders, afraid of falling into another human trap. The machines they had trusted for so long were suddenly unreliable, and the humans, those primitive, chaotic creatures, seemed to be everywhere at once. Commander Vrazil, standing at the helm of his flagship, stared down at the swirling blue planet below. "How did it come to this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. He had been trained to see the enemy as weak, to crush resistance with overwhelming force. But these humans were something different. They were clever, adaptable, and far more intelligent than the Dominion had ever imagined. In that moment, as another report of human sabotage flashed across the screen, Vrazil knew the truth. The Gravakal were no longer the hunters in this war. They had become the hunted. The final days of the war were nothing like Commander Vrazil had anticipated. What had begun as a conquest turned into a nightmare, a slow, agonizing unraveling of the Gravakal Dominion's might. Their fleet, once a symbol of invincibility, now hovered in orbit over Earth like a wounded animal, waiting for the killing blow. The humans had not just adapted to the war, they had mastered it. Their tactics, once considered strange and chaotic, had become surgical, precise, and deadly. General Sophie Westwood stood at the heart of it all, calm and focused as the final phase of her plan unfolded. "This is it," she said to her team, her voice steady. "The moment we turn the tide for good." The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Knowing the Gravakal had grown paranoid and cautious, the humans decided to take advantage of their hesitation. A series of feints and fake offensives lured the alien fleet into a false sense of security. Human forces appeared to retreat, pulling back from key locations while leaking just enough information to convince the Gravakal commanders that a full-scale human collapse was imminent. Commander Vrazil, weary and desperate for victory, took the bait. The humans are in disarray, his intelligence officers reported. Now is the time to strike. But as the Gravakal fleet descended, positioning themselves for what they believed would be the final blow, the humans sprung their trap. Hidden deep within Earth's atmosphere, human warships, camouflaged by electromagnetic interference, launched a coordinated attack. Their weapons, custom-built to disrupt the Gravakal's energy shields, ripped through the alien vessels like paper. On the ground, human forces launched simultaneous strikes on Gravakal ground bases, using guerrilla tactics to overwhelm alien soldiers. Every advance the Gravakal made was met with ambushes, sabotaged infrastructure, and precision strikes on their supply lines. The aliens, exhausted and disoriented, found themselves trapped in a web of human strategy. "They've boxed us in," one of Vrazil's subcommanders whispered, horror dawning in his eyes. "There's no escape." Above Earth, the flagship of the Gravakal fleet took a direct hit, and alarms blared throughout the command deck. Vrazil watched in disbelief as human warships, smaller, less advanced, but devastatingly effective, tore through his fleet. His mind raced, trying to comprehend how it had come to this. "How could we have fallen so far?" he muttered, gripping the edge of his command console. In a last desperate move, Vrazil ordered an orbital bombardment, hoping to turn the tide through sheer destruction. But the humans had anticipated this as well. A massive global EMP pulse, launched from hidden installations across the planet, disabled the Gravakal's weapon systems. The bombardment never came. Back on the ground, General Westwood watched as her final commands were carried out. Gravakal ground forces, cut off from their fleet and their advanced technology crippled, began to surrender. Some tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run. The humans had turned their own planet into a battlefield designed to break the invaders. Captain Nia Sullivan, standing beside Westwood, smirked as the reports of alien retreats poured in. "We did it. They never saw it coming. The war was over. What was once a seemingly impossible struggle had ended in a decisive human victory. Earth had not only survived, it had triumphed, and in doing so, shattered the myth of Gravakal invincibility. For Vrazil, there was nothing left but the bitter sting of defeat. As he watched the remnants of his once mighty fleet limping away from Earth, a profound realization sank in. The humans had beaten them not with superior weapons, but with superior minds. Every assumption the Gravakal had made about human weakness had been wrong. Standing in the silence of his shattered command deck, Vrazil could only whisper, "We never stood a chance." On Earth, the victors did not celebrate with grand parades. They mourned the losses, knowing the cost of their victory. But there was a quiet pride, a recognition that humanity had faced the galaxy's strongest empire and emerged stronger. They had learned that their true strength lay not in their technology, but in their resilience, creativity, and intelligence. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer just another species in the cosmos. They were something far more dangerous,